Hi, my name is Peyton Ford, and my research topic was originally a profile on Donald Trump. However, as I began to really get into my research, I realized that I was actually more interested in the recent expansion of his network of golf courses into Scotland. Specifically, I realized that I wanted to look at the controversy surrounding the construction of Trump International Golf Links in Aberdeen, Scotland. In the words of Mike Small, a writer for The Guardian in the United Kingdom, Trump's £750 million development on the Mini estate is at the center of a storm about land ownership, democracy, and the power of the filthy rich. The event has polarized opinions both locally and in most who have heard about the issues at hand. The course is in the process of being finished, and most of the issues stem from the fact that it is being constructed on land that is a site of special scientific interest due to the dune system that runs through that particular part of the country. This means that the land is protected by the Scottish Government and is supposed to be unavailable to build on. The issue has spawned other debates, significant among them being whether or not the economic gains outweigh the ecological harm, and possibly the most significant for Scotland as a whole, the political scandal surrounding how the project gained approval. I'm not really trying to come to a conclusion on whether Mr. Trump is right or wrong in his decision to expand or the methods that he uses to realize that expansion. Rather, my topic is to look at how the Trump Organization controlled their communication and image in order to keep a controversial project on track. The question I want to answer is not one of right or wrong, rather, how. When I began researching the topic, I started by looking at the website of the course itself. I started here because I wanted to see what the Trump Organization had to say about everything before hearing the other sides of the story. I looked at the timeline of the project first so that I could begin to develop a general understanding of the course of events. Then I looked at the projections for the finished course, number of houses, plans for future expansion, etc., to try and understand more specifically what issues were being discussed. Perhaps the most important thing that was on the course website was the FAQ section. It contained the responses from the Trump Organization to the top 10 most frequently asked questions by the public during the public inquiry that the plans for the course were subjected to during the application process. This was important because it really showed how the Trump Organization was molding its image through communication and what type of image the organization was trying to maintain. In essence, it told Trump's side of the story in all of this. After looking at the course website, I conducted my first Google search for newspaper articles or similar types of material that would show a wider range of opinions on the topic so that I could really see the whole range of issues and not the singular topic that one side was trying to focus on. After I found the first really useful article, I decided to use a trick that I was taught in my political science major. Instead of scrolling through all of my Google results until I found useful information and having to sift through all the unuseful ones, I looked at the sources of the one source that I found that was useful and went through to find any useful sources that they had found, knowing that if they had found that they were useful, that they would also be useful for me. That way I could follow in their footsteps without having to do all of the hard work. Because someone else, excuse me, I found plenty of information regarding my subject and was really able to see how each side was using communication and the press to mold their argument and try to gain support. Most helpful were news articles or columns from major news sources located in the United Kingdom, particularly BBC News and The Guardian. I also found several blog sites that showed how different types of people viewed what was going on. Once I got all my research, I had to begin the really tedious part of any research project, the organization. Luckily, this time it was smoother than other experiences that I've had. Whenever I have to complete a research project, I normally go through the same routine. First, I read through all of the articles that I've printed off and highlight sections that I know that I will use in my paper. In this case, it wasn't so bad because newspaper articles are much shorter than what I normally have to read through. Once I've weeded through each source to find what is useful and what is not, I type up all of the quotes and useful lines for future reference. This, for me, is the most important part of my organizational activities because it really allows me to know what I want to use in my writing, where I want to use it. Because of this, I make sure that each source is listed and the quotes are typed underneath. Once I've gotten them all onto the paper, I begin to structure my outline. For example, on this paper, my outline goes, Introduction, proposal, rejection, inquiry, acceptance, new obstacles, conclusion. I always try to keep my outline slightly vague so that my paper has room to evolve as I write. I then look back at my list of lines and quotes to see how they can be organized to best facilitate a writing flow. Normally, a source lends itself to one section. For example, in this paper, an article on BBC is all about the scandal over the public inquiry into the project, and so I know that it will be placed ahead of a source that deals with the acceptance for the application for construction, but behind one that deals with the original rejection. In the past, however, I've organized them by viewpoints, opinion strength, anything really that is applicable to the paper. After my outline was done, I reordered my quote sheet so that it matched up with my outline. This helps me to avoid writer's block and keep a rhythm when I write, which helps my papers to flow better and to make more sense. As I wrote my paper, I crossed off quotes that I'd use to make sure that I knew that the point I had chosen that passage for had been made. The most significant part of any research paper is results. It is why we set out to pursue the research in the first place. In this case, what I found was quite interesting. The Trump Organization's plans to build Trump International Golf Links did not go according to plan at all. When they were first announced, the project received widespread support from business and tourism leaders because of the huge economic boost it would bring to the region. However, there was a sizable section of dissidents who were unhappy about the damage to the environment potentially. Because of the classification of the area as a site of special scientific interest, the plan was originally rejected by the Aberdeenshire Council's Infrastructure Committee. However, soon after, the national government announced that it would be calling in the plans for review based on the huge impact they could have on the nation. This is where scandal emerged because of the shadiness of the process according to the opposition. The day before the government announced it would be calling in the application, senior members of Trump's staff met with the First Minister and Chief Planner of the country. Opponents said that this was improper and were further enraged when the counselor who cast the deciding vote to reject the plans was fired. Opposition called for a public inquiry into both the application and the process by which it had been called into national news. After the public inquiry, the plan was passed by the national government and construction began. Recently, however, construction has been halted due to the government's decision to build an offshore wind turbine facility in view of the course. Trump is infuriated by this and has threatened to stop construction completely if the facility is completed. He has even gone so far as to fund the opposition to the turbine facility, who, coincidentally, are an environmentalist group who was opposed to his golf facility. Each step in this process shows how communication can be manipulated and controlled to achieve the image and effect that is desired. In order to keep his pet project on track, Mr. Trump employed whatever means necessary and showed a true mastery of using communication both in the press and in public to achieve his desired results. During the initial proposal, he constantly highlighted the benefits of the plan, while pushing concerns over potential damage to the side, claiming they would be mitigated and taken care of. When the plan was rejected, the Trump Organization painted the Infrastructure Council as incompetent and ignorant, and did their best to discredit the decision and make it seem as if an appeal would certainly be accepted. In order to get this appeal to go through, Mr. Trump did whatever it took to get the plans called in to the national government, and showed everyone what happens to people who cross him. Somehow, the counselor who cast the deciding vote that rejected the plans initially was fired. During the inquiry, the organization acted innocent of any political connections or manipulations and was highly defensive whenever any claims were made. They continued to highlight the benefits of letting them have their way while also threatening to leave and take money elsewhere, which was a good scare for the business leaders and politicians of the nation. Once the plans were accepted, Trump followed in the footsteps of political candidates recently elected who know the absolute necessities after something controversial is achieved. The first step is to solidify your base, which Trump did by praising the government and businesses and promising to pour money into the country. The second thing that he needed to do was to pull in what opponents he could, which he attempted to do by promising that preventing environmental damage would be a top priority in the new course. Finally, in the recent wind turbine controversy, he seemed hypocritical for sponsoring an environmentalist group. In fact, he is just doing whatever needs to be done to ensure that his golf course is as good as possible. The most effective way of communicating this just happens to be raising environmental concerns. To conclude, Mr. Trump and his organization have shown a mastery of communication and its effects. This has allowed them to keep their project on track in spite of all the bumps in the road they have encountered. Whatever you think, whether the decision is right or wrong, it does not take away from the use of communication to achieve a favorable outcome.